It's Friday, November 6th. Let's talk PlayStation. Well, I got the date right this time, so that's good news, but we got a lot of other great PlayStation news stories to discuss. Like this one, you can finally buy premium avatars on PlayStation 4. Previously, you couldn't do that. You couldn't even change them if you previously bought them on a PlayStation 3. You could only access them on PS3. So now you can finally do it on PlayStation 4, which is good news, because that was one of my other many criticisms of Sony, is they're very inconsistent in terms of their different platforms, the features, the feature crossover. Very disjointed experience, so it's nice that they're finally kind of leveling this out a little bit, and much like last week, how there's so many other features that we want to get to that Sony knows that we want, so that's good. Moving on, Sony announced that at the upcoming PSX event, which is going to be, of course, December 5th to the 6th, where they're going to be holding a conference and everything, and of course a show floor featuring a bunch of games, they're going to be giving away collectible cards. They actually did this last year, I believe, with like only 6 or 7 different cards, something like that. I don't remember there being a whole bunch. Now, of course, I didn't go to PSX, but they did do this last year, and I guess they're doing it again this year, offering up to like 35 new cards. You can go to different like areas of the show floor and collect all the cards. There's like up to 60 basically in terms of cards, if you're also counting in the fact that there's rares and commons. But Sony is saying that there's a lot more that they want to potentially do with these cards, and so they're saying like stay tuned for that. Who knows what that means? If they're going to sell them, if they're like going to turn into some sort of, I don't know, rewards program, I have no clue, right? But pretty cool, I guess, because I don't know, we're gamers, we're kind of into that goofy, nonchalant, that kind of goofy merchandisey type stuff. But let's talk a little bit about PlayStation Now. We don't talk about this that often, and it's probably because a lot of people don't use it and a lot of people don't care about it. But one big significant thing that Sony did this past week was add over 100 new games to PlayStation Now, just like that, like instantly. They've been, progressively adding titles to the service. Initially it launched with like a little over 100. They worked their way up to about 150 titles, and just like that, they nearly doubled the amount of titles available on the service. So you might not still agree with the prices, you might not still agree with the fact that it's streaming games, but they have significantly like added sort of a decent amount of value there with 100 more games. So if you're at the very slightest inclined to give PlayStation Now a try, that's probably a good enough reason to go in and see all the titles that you want to try out. Now, The Last Guardian we haven't really talked a whole lot about because, well, we haven't seen it since E3, and E3 was the re-reveal of the actual series again, the actual game. But Shuhei gave us a little bit of info, and that's basically him saying that there's a reason why we're not seeing more of it. Development is going well, but because it's about the story, we don't want to show too much. We wanted to show that it exists, it works, it runs. It's not like we won't show anything before launch, but I think we will try to limit what we show about the game. So, I mean, sure, that's sort of a fair notion, I guess, Shuhei. The game is still due for 2016, but we do want to see more of it very, very soon. And I think because PSX is right around the corner, we probably will see it at PSX. Hopefully that those comments that he's saying are very true to the fact of, hey, we don't want to show that much, and it's not another situation where this game isn't that quite ready to actually come out in 2016. So I'm gonna stay optimistic. Now let's get into some more speculating, rumory type news stories. So developer Ready at Dawn has recently confirmed on Twitter, the Ready at Dawn's founder Andrea Pacino confirmed that the studio is working on multiple projects, basically. So I would assume at least 2 games. The studio isn't that massive, so I don't know if they can be working on more than 2 games. But they're confirming multiple projects, and that they're within the next month going to be bringing on a lot more staff to work on these games. And you might be thinking to yourself right now, well, hey Ryan, why are you talking about this? I mean, I know that they did work on the Order 1886, but Ready Dawn has recently mentioned how they want to possibly go independent, possibly release on all platforms and not just stick with Sony or something. So, what's the deal here? Why is this certainly Sony specific? And of course, I want to talk about this Sony specifically because Ready Dawn has had a long history of working directly with Sony and Sony publishing Ready at Dawn games. Of course, Ready at Dawn did multiple PSP games, and we all know that Sony is having very close ties with a lot of developers doing second party exclusives. So the fact that Ready Dawn has multiple games in the works could possibly tell you that, hey, one of those titles is more than likely going to be another PlayStation exclusive. I don't know, but it certainly could be something that Sony wants to do. I mean, it doesn't even have to be a sequel to the Order 1886. Of course, the game didn't do all that well critically, but it probably still sold decent enough for Sony to certainly want to investigate a sequel to the game. I know Ready at Dawn wants to do a sequel to the game because of how the game's story played out, basically. So who knows? It's just one of those things where you kind of just step back and let Ready at Dawn do their thing, and whenever they're ready to show something, we'll see what they can do. I mean, they are a talented studio. Their PSP games were very, very good, and of course, The Order 1886 does have its problems, but you can't deny the fact of how beautiful that game looks and how ambitious certainly their goal was with that game. So certainly it's a talented studio that can produce very good things, and I just hope we see something better come from them. This next news story is like really, really rumory, and we don't often talk about things like this on LTPS, but I got a good reason for why we're talking about it now. So on NeoGAF, one user named Verendus recently kind of somewhat leaked the possibility of what From Software is doing for their next game. Of course, From Software, the developer of Bloodborne. He was quoted as saying, the next From Software exclusive for PS4 currently in development is a Sony-published first-party title like Bloodborne and is a JRPG. There is another project in development in similar context which is also a JRPG and is going to be a Sony-published title, aka first-party. Beyond that, I don't want to delve into anything, but it honestly only takes a little common sense to realize that Shu isn't going to tell you what anyone's up to because you happen to ask him a question. Nothing exists until it's officially time for it to exist. Which... Now, that last comment, by the way, that is what I'm always preaching to you guys. You can never believe what a developer or a publisher or any sort of PR statement, whatever you hear, because nothing is going... Nobody's going to tell you the absolute truth in an interview. They want to save these things for an official announcement at a press release on an E3 stage. Who knows? So obviously... if you ever ask Shu, hey, are you guys working on this? And he says no, you can't take that for what it is. Like recently when he said, you know, Sony's not working on any, Sony first party isn't currently working on any JRPGs, which a couple of people asked me, why didn't you talk about this? Which is something Shuhei did say, you know, we're currently not working on JRPGs. Now, you look at this news story and you think, okay, it's just another one of those industry insiders on NeoGAF claiming that so-and-so is going to happen. The only reason why I'm sort of mentioning it here is because this user was quickly banned right after. Now, of course, there's a number of reasons why he could have been banned on NeoGAF, which is the fact of what he did. But... you know, when a user gets banned on NeoGAF, it could be a number of reasons, and one of them could be that the fact that somebody at Sony was very angry about it. That's absolutely a possibility. Some people are saying that is the possibility. That's neither here nor there. I wouldn't normally talk about something like this based on that fact alone, but what I am saying is this is how we figured out about Bloodborne to begin with. Bloodborne was leaked actually on NeoGAF. We got it leaked through like a short clip of the game. We saw footage of it before it was formally announced. Like, that is totally how we found out about Bloodborne. So there is a very real possibility that this could have happened again. You know, obviously this is sort of like years out. Games take a very long time to make, so we're never going to see what's actually going to happen from this comment for a very long time, but it's just kind of something to keep in the back of your mind, which is, you know, never believe Sony when they say they're not working on JRPGs, and Sony has close ties to From Software. Like I just mentioned, they're doing tons of second-party exclusives. They're funding development of games, publishing all these games with third-party developers. You know, anything's possible. All right, now this news story is like completely echoing what we talked about last week and just kind of re-solidifying what we already know. But it just kind of brings up a good discussion point that I wanted to talk about. So Shuhei, once again, reconfirmed, you know, we are actually working on PlayStation Vita titles, but he's being completely upfront by the fact that the focus has shifted to PlayStation 4. He was quoted as saying, I've been pretty honest saying our focus has shifted to PS4 and PlayStation VR. It's not like we don't have any development at all. We do, but our focus is on PS4 and PlayStation VR, and we are happy to see third parties and indies support it. Now, when Shuhei was asked about the possibility of Vita beyond 2016, he said, yeah, I do, but we have to see. Nowadays, still people are excited and using Vita very frequently. It's a great portable gaming system. As long as there is demand, why not? Now, of course, I always appreciate honesty in the games industry. I mean, who wouldn't? And that's the thing. I mean, even if you don't like what Sony has to say about Vita, they've been very upfront with saying the focus has moved to PlayStation 4. We've stopped doing major AAA games on the device. You know, this, that, and the other. And it's disappointing to hear, but at least that's the truth. And what I've always been telling you guys is Vita has not necessarily failed. It's not necessarily done for. It is still on the market. Sony still manufactures the system. They still ship it to retailers. They still work very hard with the independent developers and any developer. They'll send them dev kits. You know, they still update PlayStation Plus every week with free Vita games and stuff, you know what I'm saying? Like, they are absolutely still doing, like, the bare minimum with the device, I guess, which, again, I understand, it's shitty, it's not cool, but the support technically is still there, that the device, excuse me, I'm tripping over my words, the device is still kind of floating along in its own little world, in its own little landscape. And that's another thing, is tons of developers have been open about the fact that, yeah, we love Vita. We love the fact that the people that play Vita are so dedicated on that platform, and there's a high game per system rate on that, basically, where Vita players are buying tons of games. Developers can release games on Vita and make money and make profit off of it, which all in itself is a recipe for a good platform, more or less. So, but what I was getting when I was thinking to this, and how Shuhei said, you know, absolutely, if the demand is still there, we'll support it past 2016. And you always think, like, okay, well, is Sony going to do another platform? You know, will they do another handheld, something like that? And it's like, well, at this case, you know, are they really going to do another handheld after they just, you know, after the rocky road Vita's been through? And I'm just thinking to myself, like, what Sony could really do in terms of that, you know, like, could they do another handheld? I mean, absolutely they could. Would it be a smart idea? I don't know. What I've always been saying is, like, you know, especially with like PS4 and how consoles at some point are going to have to sort of adapt to how the market's working and whatnot, where it's like, oh, you know, it'd be maybe ideal if like a new console would come out every year, but it just worked in the same veins of a smartphone, where games would scale accordingly to the platform, but you don't have to buy a new PlayStation every year, you don't have to buy a new Xbox every year, but every year the platform does get more powerful, but you can still buy a game today for a PlayStation that's 4 years old or something. You see what I'm saying? And maybe that's something that Vita could turn into as well. I mean, that's another big grand scheme of what I'm talking about here, and why a console, it would be healthy for a console to be something like that. And that's one of the main advantages to something like PC gaming, or of course, if you play games on smartphones or something like that, or even just casually download apps. It's like you just have this huge legacy library, basically. So to have the Vita in a sort of ecosystem where, you know, it plays PSP games, PS1 games, PS Vita games, updating Vita hardware, making it more powerful, or possibly just, you know, cheapening it, making it more affordable, making more revisions to the hardware, but basically letting this thing live on the market in usually a large amount of time, because you can just keep slowly adapting it that way, instead of releasing it a completely new platform, completely changing the development environment for that platform, thus making it difficult to do backwards compatibility and ports and network infrastructure, right? I mean, when you do a whole new platform, that's what's so demanding about a new platform, is that it's completely changing what's going to happen in terms of game development and the game library, which is why it's always such a heated debate about backwards compatibility and support and you know, cross-platform play and all these things, right? Like, all those things are a huge issue with consoles, because they're a closed box. So it's like, you know, you look at Vita, and Vita could be possibly a device that could change like that down the road if Sony wanted to possibly do something like that. Of course, this is kind of a very open-ended discussion, and it's always difficult to talk about the future in terms of technology. And you know, certainly I'm no expert. Your guess is as good as mine, but there's just a number of ways Sony could really do this, and I'm sure Nintendo and Microsoft, all manufacturers are looking at what they want to do in the future and how they want to adapt to the market. And for our final news story, Sony's group marketing manager Lauren Bradley discussed a little bit about how shooter fans are basically moving over to PlayStation 4, and PlayStation's kind of being the place to be for the shooter genre, citing a couple of things like Sony's recent ties with third-party developers. You know, they've got marketing rights to Star Wars Battlefront, Call of Duty map packs are first on PlayStation now. We all know the huge tie that Sony has with Bungie and Destiny. We all know that was a big sort of agreement there. I mean, we just know that Sony's been doing very well recently. I know Ubisoft just had their earnings call, their fiscal results and everything, and the majority of their third-party software, they are third-party software, a majority of their games are strictly being sold on PlayStation 4. PS4 had a commanding lead, I think, at 27% compared to you know, Xbox and Wii U, PS3 and 360. So all around, it's kind of a good thing for Sony. I mean, you see a news story like this, and you might think to yourself, like, that's kind of BS, because shooter fans love Xbox and all this sort of nonsense. But realistically, looking at the numbers, absolutely, that's kind of the case. And it's also one of those just classic PR statements that's good for a lot of publications to pick up on, because, you know, IGN gets to post this up. GameSpot gets to put this up, and it's like, oh, you know, PS4 is the place for shooter fans now, but realistically, it's like, well, yeah, because it's selling the majority now. It's got market leadership, of course. I mean, even when you look at sales, even if you don't agree with hardware numbers, you can look at software numbers. Call of Duty sells the most on PlayStation Now. Destiny sold the most on PlayStation Now. So, yeah, absolutely, that is the case. People have moved over from the other platform, which, again, is Xbox. And that's kind of what it all boiled down to, because if you looked at last generation, even when PlayStation 3 started to catch up to 360, even when PlayStation 3 finally got like a slight million console lead on 360, third party was still very strong on 360. People still loved 360. People primarily gamed on 360. That was a lot of people's primary platform. So more often than not, third-party sales were very good on 360, and 360 kind of led third-party sales for like Call of Duty or most major shooters, or tons of genres that 360 leaded the platform on. So just one of those classic examples, I guess, where the shift, like that dramatic shift, really can take place. You know, I mean, and no hardware manufacturer can really get comfortable like Sony did with PlayStation 3, and then they really tried to sell you an expensive box that wasn't nearly as good as 360 at the time. And then people said, "Ah, screw you, I'm going over to Xbox." You know what I'm saying? So it just happened the same thing here, where people said, "Oh, screw you, I'm going to PlayStation." The consumer speaks. I mean, you vote with your dollar. That's what I always tell people, especially whenever somebody complains about DLC or microtransactions or remasters or ports or any of that stuff. If you don't like any of that stuff, no one's making you buy it, and you're supposed to vote with your dollar, and that's just to not buy it. If you don't like these things, don't do anything about it. Don't give these publishers your money. Don't give the hardware manufacturers your money. That's the whole idea. It's kind of a simple one. And I'm also realizing I'll probably use this story as a cover story for LTPS, where I'll use it in the thumbnail and the title. So I guess I'm also kind of guilty of taking advantage of that. But it also made for a good discussion, I might add. So just a little defense to myself. Anyway, those are some of the news stories I want to talk about with you guys this week. The Ryan on Gaming topic was Call of Duty. When will it die? I mean, it's so popular. So many people love it. And Black Ops 3 just came out, so it seems pretty reasonable that we talk about something like that. When will that series die? When? Check out that discussion, because it's an awesome one. I mean, I know this. I know I say that every week, but like, come on, man, it is. And Jak 2's up too. We're still playing that. I know it's taken a very long time, but that's because we only upload one part every week, and a lot of you guys want multiple parts a week. But I can only upload so much. Don't be greedy. Santa knows, man. Santa knows you can't be greedy. Otherwise, you're not going to get nothing under your tree. Unless you celebrate a different holiday, in which case, whatever it is you celebrate, the same sort of metaphor I use for the Santa thing, like, apply it to your holiday. Like, don't be greedy. And so ends another episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. So, I'm Ryan Badecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me. And I'll see you guys next Friday.